I'd been traveling for work for a while, and while I enjoyed the challenge, I always looked forward to coming home. My wife Nikki was constantly on my mind, and as my trips dragged on, I couldn't wait to be with her. We had our little routines, watching a movie or going out to eat, simple things that made life feel normal again. This particular trip had been tough, but I finished early. The project in Dallas went well, and I could surprise Nikki by coming home sooner than expected. The thought of her smile made all the long days worth it. As I headed upstairs with my things, my mind was already on spending the evening with Nikki. Then, I turned around and saw a man at the top of the stairs, holding a tool. Before I could react, I saw a flash and was thrown backward down the stairs. Then, everything went dark. When I woke up, I found myself in an unfamiliar bed. It was dark and I heard someone whispering nearby. I tried to move but could barely shift my head. As I struggled to focus, I recognized Nikki's voice. She was talking to a man whose back was to me. "What did the doctor say?" he asked. "He said Eric's doing better but isn't out of danger yet," Nikki replied. I realized they were talking about me. I couldn't figure out what was going on, but Nikki seemed to be pushing him toward the door. "John, you shouldn't be here," she said. "Does he remember anything?" "I don't know," she replied. He was too pilled up to talk to the detective. Nikki urged him to leave, and when I opened my eyes again, she was sitting by the window. The man was gone, and I wasn't sure if I had imagined him. I wanted to ask Nikki where I was and who the man was, but I felt too tired. The next time I woke up, it was morning, and I could see Nikki by the window. She had been crying. I turned my head and saw a man I vaguely remembered, though I didn't know who he was. He was short, with curly brown hair, wearing a worn-out suit. I closed my eyes, pretending to be asleep to avoid his questions. Later, the room was empty, and it was dark outside. I tried to make sense of everything. I knew I was in a hospital, but I didn't know why or for how long. Slowly, my memory returned. I remembered coming home from Dallas, setting down my bags, and heading upstairs. Then I saw a man at the top with a tool. A flash, a bang, and I was falling. After that, I only had fragmented memories. Waking up in the hospital, Nikki crying, and maybe that man asking me questions. But I wasn't sure what was real or what was a dream. The next time I saw Nikki, she looked exhausted, pale, with bloodshot, puffy eyes. She came over, took my hand, and kissed my forehead. "Nikki, are you okay?" "You don't look well," I said, surprised at how weak my voice sounded. Here's a revised version with clearer attribution of dialogue. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted softly. "I was so scared of losing you. But the doctor says you're out of danger now and should make a full recovery." I blinked, trying to gather my thoughts. "How long have I been here?" "Since Friday," she replied. "What's today?" I asked. "Tuesday," she said. I stared at the ceiling. "I've lost 3 days," I muttered. She leaned in, her voice filled with concern. "How are you feeling now?" "I'm not sure," I said. "My head feels clear, better than before, but I don't feel much otherwise." "What happened?" "You don't remember?" she asked, her tone slightly alarmed. "Only bits and pieces," I admitted. Before she could say more, a familiar voice interrupted. "Why don't I fill him in?" said the man I now recognized as the detective. Curly, still in his worn-out suit, sat down next to Nikki. "I'm Detective Tony Trenka. I'm handling your case," he said. "You were shot during a burglary when you came home from Dallas on Friday. You were stricken 3 times, in the chest and abdomen, by a man at the top of your stairs. Nikki found you and called emergency." He continued, explaining that I was lucky for 2 reasons. The shooter used a low-caliber tool, and Nikki arrived just in time to save me. I squeezed Nikki's hand, overwhelmed. "Do you know who did it?" I asked. "There have been a string of burglaries in your area, but no one's been shot until now. We're hoping the panic of the shooting left us some clues." Detective Trenka asked me what I remembered, but I could only recall seeing the man at the top of the stairs and his tool before I blacked out. "You'll probably remember more later," he reassured me. "I'll check in tomorrow." After he left, I turned to Nikki. "Thanks for saving my life." She teared up and kissed me. "I don't know what I'd do without you," she whispered. Then a terrible thought hit me. "Nikki, if I hadn't come home when I did, you might have been the one who walked in on them." Tears filled my eyes as the realization sank in. We held each other, both crying for a while. Eventually, I began to feel some pain, and a nurse came to give me something to help me sleep. When I woke up, Nikki was by the window reading. "What did they take?" I asked. "I don't know yet," she replied. I haven't been back to the house since the shooting. The police are still investigating, and I couldn't bear to see it after what happened." "I understand," I said softly. "We'll figure it out when they finish." While Nikki was with me, we avoided talking about what happened on Friday. After she left that night, I lay in bed thinking about how close I'd come to losing everything, including her. It could have easily been Nikki who was shot instead of me. I tried to remember more details about the shooting, and something came to mind. I wasn't sure if it was accurate, but I hoped Detective Trenka would visit the next day so I could tell him. A nurse gave me something for pain, and I fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up feeling a little better, but still unable to move much. Nikki came in, kissed me, and said she had to go to work. She stayed until the doctor arrived. "How are you feeling?" the doctor asked. "I'm okay, considering," I replied, asking why I couldn't move my arms or legs. "We had to immobilize you after surgery to prevent further injury," he explained. "Your injuries were serious, but you're lucky. The bullets missed vital organs." He added that I might be able to go home by Monday, and I wouldn't return to work for at least 3 weeks. After the doctor left, Nikki seemed relieved. She kissed me, promised to return by 4, and left for her meeting. Once alone, I tried to sleep, but couldn't. Later, a nurse came in and removed the restraints, giving me more mobility. I was watching pigeons outside when Detective Trenka appeared. "Feeling better?" he asked, sitting down. "I think so," I replied. "I remembered something last night. I think the shooter held the tool in his left hand and was wearing a black ring on his middle finger, maybe onyx." "That's helpful," he said, jotting it down. "Knowing he's left-handed and wore an onyx ring is a good lead." We talked for a while, and I noticed he was still wearing the same suit. He explained it was his only one after losing all his clothes in a fire. Before leaving, Detective Trenka told me something chilling. The shooter didn't just think I was dead. He wanted me to die slowly. That's why he shot me in the stomach instead of the head. He promised to find out why. Afterward, he asked me more about my job and co-workers, hinting that someone I knew might be involved. Only after he left did I realize what he might be thinking. Over the next few days, I grew stronger, walking the hospital halls with help. Nikki visited every morning and came back after work for dinner, staying until visiting hours ended. Late at night, when I felt lonely, I'd call her, and we'd talk for over half an hour. As I recovered, I noticed Nikki wasn't doing as well. She looked pale, tired, and had lost weight. I hated knowing how much she had suffered, but I hoped she'd improve once we got home. At night, I thought about how we met in college. We'd first crossed paths at a party, but she didn't make much of an impression at the time. 2 weeks later, we met again, and this time she smiled. After that, we went on our first date, and by the end of the week, we were seeing each other exclusively. Thinking about those memories kept me going through my time in the hospital. Nikki and I had been married for 6 years, and the trip to Dallas had only been our second time apart. The first was when she took a group of students to Germany, and I had to miss it for a work conference. I missed her terribly, but when we reunited, I planned a romantic dinner and we spent a perfect evening together. Nikki even brought me a beautiful beer stein from Germany, a special addition to my collection. Her gift and the memory of that night reminded me how lucky I was to have her in my life. By Monday, I was ready to go home. Nikki had taken the day off and was there early to pick me up. As we drove away, she told me we'd be staying at her parents' house because our home hadn't been cleaned yet. A specialized cleaning crew was coming that day, and I insisted on being there to see what was missing for the insurance claim. On the way home, Nikki stayed quiet, clearly worried about how I'd react to the mess inside. Before we arrived, I told her it would be easier for me to enter through the front door, rather than struggle with the garage stairs. She helped me out of the car, and we slowly walked to the front door. As soon as I stepped inside, a metallic, coppery smell hit me, and I saw my small suitcase and a bag, both soaked in blood, along with a large, dried puddle on the floor. The sight and smell were overwhelming, and when Nikki came in, she ran to the bathroom to vomit. After she finished, I led her to the family room, trying to calm her down as we sat on the couch. Looking around, I noticed some things scattered on the floor and realized the beer stein Nikki had brought me from Germany was missing. Just as I started to think it might have been stolen, Nikki broke my thoughts. Apologizing for not being able to handle the blood, she insisted on making me lunch and getting me to bed, but I told her I wasn't ready for the stairs. I suggested she leave me a sandwich and go back to work so she wouldn't have to be there when the cleaners arrived. Though hesitant, she agreed, made me a sandwich, and left. The cleaners arrived an hour later, and after I let them in, they got to work on the bloodstains. While they worked, I checked the safe in the cabinet above the fireplace. Thankfully, nothing was missing or tampered with, and I felt relieved. I was too tired to clean up the rest of the room, so I rested on the couch. By the time Nikki returned, the house smelled of cinnamon, and the foyer was spotless. Despite the clean house, Nikki looked more stressed than ever. After a large glass of whiskey, she finally relaxed, but started crying, saying she just wanted it all to go away. I tried to comfort her, assuring her the police would catch the burglars, but it didn't seem to help. That night, we slept in the same bed for the first time in 2 weeks, though neither of us slept well. I kept waking up thinking I heard something, and every time Nikki was awake too. By Tuesday, things improved. I felt stronger, managed the stairs on my own, and had breakfast with Nikki before she left for work, while I stayed behind to clean the kitchen. Later that morning, Detective Trenka stopped by to check on me and ask about anything that was stolen. As we chatted, I brewed some coffee. "Did you make a list of what's missing?" he asked. "No, because nothing seems to be missing," I replied. "Really?" Trenka said, surprised. "I've been thinking there must have been at least 2 people involved," I said. Trenka, now asking me to call him Tony, encouraged me to share my theory. I explained how the mess downstairs suggested someone searched the first floor but left in a hurry after the shooting. I found it odd that they didn't take the TV or even try to open the safe. Tony agreed that the shots might have scared them off, but didn't want to rule out other possibilities. He accepted my offer for coffee, and we sat in the family room discussing the burglary. As I looked at the mess, I asked a question that had been bothering me. "Do you think the guy who shot me might come back?" "There's always a chance," Tony admitted, "but it's unlikely. He knows you didn't see his face, and returning would just increase his risk of getting caught." I mentioned Nikki's worry about the burglars returning, and Tony offered to increase patrols in our area. Grateful, I shifted the conversation, asking about his home life. Tony admitted his wife had forgiven him for a mistake, almost involving another woman, but they were doing better now. After Tony left, I spent the rest of the day cleaning up. While there wasn't much to tidy, I was still weak and had to move slowly. The hardest part was picking up the broken glass from the beer stein Nikki had brought me from Germany. It was the only thing that had been shattered, and it felt personal. Upstairs, I found that nothing had been disturbed. Nikki's jewelry was untouched, which led me to believe I must have interrupted the burglars before they could search the second floor. When Nikki came home that evening, the house was spotless. She scolded me for overexerting myself, but I assured her I felt fine. After dinner, she helped me to bed and changed my bandages, relieved that there was no sign of infection. Exhausted, I fell asleep during a gentle massage she gave me. The next morning, Nikki mentioned an open house at school. I encouraged her to go, even though I could see she was still worried about me. Before leaving for work, she hugged me tightly and whispered, "I love you." "I love you too," I replied. After Nikki left, the house felt too quiet. I wanted to do something but couldn't take on any physically demanding tasks after overexerting myself the day before. I promised both Nikki and myself to take it easy. I put on some music, kept the volume low, and started reading a Dean Koontz book I had recently bought. I read through the day, pausing only for lunch until Nikki came home. She was happy I hadn't pushed myself, but lightly scolded me for not taking a nap. After she left for the school open house, I tried watching TV but got bored of reruns. My thoughts drifted back to the burglary and shooting. Something felt off. How could the burglars leave without taking anything? And how did they get in? I decided to check the safe again. Going through its contents, I found something I missed the first time. 2 $300 American Airlines vouchers. The realization hit me hard. Annette. My mind raced, and I started to suspect Nikki had been involved. The thought that she could have been upstairs with the shooter when I was shot filled me with anger, but I knew I needed to stay calm and gather more information. I realized I couldn't confront Nikki yet. Instead, I called my best friend, Jim Culkin, a lawyer, and explained everything. He agreed to come by the next morning. After that, I called Detective Tony Trenka, asking him to come over that night at 9 o'clock because I had important information about the case. By the time Nikki returned at 8:50, I was making notes, planning what to do next. When she asked what I was writing, I told her it wasn't important and mentioned that Jim and Tony were coming over. Nikki looked surprised but curious about Jim. However, her tone shifted to concern when I mentioned Tony. She asked if they had caught the robber, and I told her we'd find out soon enough. Nikki went upstairs to change while I sat there, struggling to control my rising anger. I knew I had to stay calm until I heard what Tony and Jim had to say. Jim arrived right on time at 9 o'clock. As he walked in, he gave me a quick look, likely assessing my condition. Nikki came down and warmly greeted Jim, hugging him and kissing his cheek. Before we could talk much, the doorbell rang again, and Tony arrived. After introductions, Tony seemed curious about Jim's presence. "Jim's here as an observer," I said lightly. Tony didn't question it, and we all moved to the family room. I had coffee ready, and Nikki helped serve it. Once we were seated, I asked Tony about the news he mentioned on the phone. Tony shared that the gang of robbers suspected in my shooting had been arrested that afternoon. However, his hesitation made it clear he had doubts. Sensing this, I pressed him. "Do you think they're the ones who shot me?" Tony paused but admitted, "I'm not sure." Before I could respond, Nikki grabbed my arm. "Do you know who shot you?" she asked, clearly anxious. I shook my head. "No, but I think I can help Tony figure it out." Jim leaned in, listening as I explained my suspicions. I told them about finding the American Airlines vouchers in the safe and how my memories from that day were starting to come together. I explained that when I arrived home at 12:15, the first floor wasn't disturbed yet. The mess was created after I was shot, which suggested the burglars weren't downstairs when I got home. Nikki's face went pale as she listened. "Eric, what are you saying?" I told them that I believed the shooter was already upstairs when I arrived, and the scene downstairs was staged to look like a burglary afterward. I looked directly at Tony and said, "I think Nikki knows who shot me and why." Tony wasn't surprised. "I've been thinking the same thing," he said. "I'll need to take her in for questioning." I asked Tony to let Jim speak with Nikki first, since he was her lawyer. Tony agreed and left, saying that if Nikki didn't voluntarily go to the station, they'd issue a warrant. After Tony left, Jim reminded me that anything Nikki told him would be confidential. I assured him I understood and that I just wanted her to have someone she trusted by her side. Jim then went to talk to Nikki privately while I waited upstairs. 20 minutes later, Jim called me down. He told me Nikki wanted to gather some clothes before leaving. While Jim went to his office, Nikki would pack her things upstairs. I wanted to ask if Nikki had agreed to cooperate with the police, but I knew I couldn't. Jim would tell me what he could, and the rest I would have to wait for. As Nikki packed upstairs, I sat at my desk, trying to process everything. Had I missed signs of trouble in our marriage? The idea of Nikki being involved with another man didn't make sense, but the evidence pointed that way. Tony had suspected it even before I did. Was Nikki having an affair? Did her lover shoot me? The thought that she waited 8 minutes before calling emergency haunted me. Was she hoping I wouldn't survive? I struggled to reconcile the loving wife I knew with what might have happened. It scared me that I might never know the full truth. I wiped away tears as Jim poked his head in. "Eric, we're leaving. You said you'd call Nikki's dad, right?" "Yeah, I'll call him soon," I replied. After Jim and Nikki left, I braced myself for the difficult conversation ahead. I called her father, George, and explained the situation, asking him to be there for her. George was shocked, insisting Nikki couldn't be involved, but I told him she'd be staying with him and Mary for a while. After the call, I sat at my desk, overwhelmed by everything. Thoughts raced through my mind. Did Nikki plan this? How long had the affair been going on? The idea that her lover shot me kept repeating in my head. To calm down, I took a painkiller and managed to fall asleep. The next morning, I felt lost. I was angry at Nikki, but missed her at the same time. The phone rang several times. Calls from her school, her mother, and some that left no messages. I wondered if one of the calls could have been from her lover. At 5 p.m., Tony called. I picked up and he asked how I was doing. After some small talk, he came over for a drink. Tony told me Nikki had cooperated with the police and was questioned for 2 hours before being released. He also revealed that they had identified the shooter but were waiting to arrest him when he returned from out of state. They didn't want to tip him off by arresting him too soon. While I felt some relief knowing the shooter had been identified, it hurt knowing they got the information from Nikki. Tony couldn't tell me more about her involvement, but the fact that she knew the shooter confirmed my worst fears. As we sat there, Tony suggested I get away for a while, maybe to the beach or Vegas. I agreed it was a good idea. "I'll call you if anything important comes up," Tony assured me before leaving. I decided a change of scenery might be exactly what I needed. Tony stayed for another hour just talking. At first, I thought he was fishing for information, but he genuinely wanted to chat. Before leaving, he took my cell number and asked me to let him know where I'd be staying. After he left, I considered where to go. Hawaii sounded great, but I didn't feel up for a long flight. Most places seemed either too far or not far enough. By the time I went to bed, I hadn't decided. Friday morning, I called my office. Everything was running smoothly without me, which was both a relief and a disappointment. My boss, Charlie, told me not to worry and to come back whenever I was ready. He asked how Nikki was coping, but I didn't mention her involvement in the shooting. Charlie suggested I go to Vegas to unwind, and when I hesitated, he offered his house there. He hadn't used it in a while and asked if I could check on it while I stayed. He even said I could use the old Honda in the garage and asked if I'd restock the fridge with some Heineken for his next visit. I accepted the offer, booked my flight for the next morning, and called Nikki's parents to let them know she could stop by the house for her things. Mary, her mom, begged me to talk to Nikki, but I couldn't. I was too angry. When Mary suggested we could work things out, I snapped, reminding her that Nikki's lover had shot me. After hanging up, I felt ashamed for how I'd spoken to her, but still didn't see how things could improve between Nikki and me. That evening, Charlie dropped off the keys to the Vegas house. When he mentioned that I'd like it, I awkwardly explained that Nikki wasn't coming. I asked him to keep my trip private, and he agreed. I called Tony to tell him about my Vegas plans. He warned me not to tell anyone where I was going until the shooter was in custody. Tony was still uneasy about the delay in arresting him and didn't want to take any risks. He also advised me not to talk to Nikki until things were sorted out. As we wrapped up the conversation, Tony mentioned that the ADA would question Nikki again soon and asked if I had anything that could help. I couldn't think of anything useful. Nikki had never given me any reason to suspect her before all this. Tony reassured me, reminding me that I needed to stay strong for what was coming next. Before he left, we acknowledged that we'd become friends through this ordeal, and despite everything, I appreciated having him on my side. We parted on a light note, joking about how having a cop as a friend might come in handy. After the conversation with Tony, I packed for my trip, keeping it light since I wasn't strong enough to carry heavy luggage. I packed a small bag with mostly socks, underwear, 3 pairs of pants, shorts, and 6 shirts. Since Charlie's house had a washer and dryer, I didn't need much, and if I needed anything else, I could buy it in Vegas. By 10:30 a.m. Saturday, I was in a cab heading west on Charleston Boulevard in 101-degree heat. Charlie had called his house small, but at 3,500 square feet, it was more elegant than I expected. It had white stucco, a red tile roof, and a grand entrance with red oak double doors and stained glass windows. Inside, everything was high-tech, with a smart home system controlling the air conditioning, security cameras, and more. The house lifted my spirits briefly. I thought, Nikki would love this. But the sadness and anger returned. I was here alone because of her. To distract myself, I decided to start the Honda in the garage and go grocery shopping. The car, though old, was in great condition and started right away. I remembered a nearby shopping center and bought enough food, drinks, and beer for a week. By the time I got back, I was exhausted, but managed to put the groceries away and eat a sandwich. I changed into swim trunks, checked my scars in the mirror, and felt self-conscious about them. To avoid the neighbors seeing them, I put on a shirt before heading outside, but the heat drove me into the pool anyway. After cooling off, I lay down on a lounge chair, nearly asleep, when my phone rang. "Eric," said the voice on the other end. "Hey, Tony, what's up?" I replied. "Good. I need to ask you a few questions if you don't mind." "Sure, go ahead," I said, a bit surprised he had more questions. "Tell me about Sarah Bowden," Tony asked. "Sarah Bowden? What does she have to do with this?" I responded, confused. "I was hoping you could tell me," Tony said. "She's a girl I knew in college." "You dated her?" Tony continued. "Yeah, we went out 3 or 4 times." "Did you have sex with her?" Tony asked bluntly. I felt irritation creeping in. "What's this about?" "It's just part of the investigation, so did you?" "No," I said firmly. "Is that why you stopped dating her? Because she didn't want to?" Tony pressed further. "No, it wasn't like that. We just realized it wasn't going anywhere, so we stopped seeing each other." "Did you stay in touch after that?" he asked. "We did for a bit, but nothing serious," I answered. "Why are you asking about someone I dated over 10 years ago?" I asked, frustration building. "Something came up in the investigation that I need to follow up on," Tony explained. "Were you dating your wife at that time?" he asked. "No, I hadn't met Nikki yet," I clarified. "Okay, tell me more about how you met Sarah," Tony urged. I took a deep breath, recalling the memory. It was a Saturday night. I was getting gas when a car pulled up with a guy yelling at a girl. When I went inside to pay, the guy followed me. While he was inside, the girl got out and asked me to take her with me. She had a bruise on her face, so I told her to get in. We went to a Denny's and talked. She said the guy wasn't her boyfriend, just someone she had gone out with twice, and he'd hit her earlier that night. "Do you know who the guy was?" Tony asked. "No, I don't remember if she ever told me his name," I said. "Is there anything else you can tell me about Sarah?" Tony asked, pressing for more information. "No, I haven't heard anything about her since college," I replied, then paused as something resurfaced in my mind. "Wait, Nikki asked me about her a year ago." "Why did Nikki ask?" Tony asked, sounding curious. "I don't know, it was right after she got back from Germany. She just asked if I knew Sarah Bowden." "And what did you tell her?" Tony asked. "I told her the truth, that I knew her from college." "Did Nikki say why she was asking?" He continued. "She said someone told her to ask, but she didn't say who." "Why was Nikki in Germany?" Tony asked. "She was chaperoning a school trip," I answered. "Who else was on the trip?" Tony pressed. I listed the other teachers and chaperones, and I noticed Tony's expression shift slightly. "Why didn't you go?" he asked. "I had to cancel because of a work conference in Denver." "Did Nikki ever mention Sarah again?" Tony asked. "No." "That's it then?" Tony asked, his voice calm. "Yes, I hope so," I replied, feeling uneasy. "What do you mean by that?" I asked, picking up on his tone. "I don't know if Sarah Bowden is involved, but it's a lead I need to follow," Tony said. "I hope you've told me everything." Frustrated, I replied, "Are you suggesting I'm hiding something? I thought we were friends." "Eric, I am your friend, but I'm also a cop, and I have to do my job," Tony said firmly. "Someone's trying to drag Sarah into this mess, and I don't see how she fits," I muttered. The rest of the weekend, I tried to relax, swimming, reading, and clearing my head. But Tony's questions about Sarah lingered. Why was she suddenly relevant? And what did Tony really suspect? On Monday, I decided to be more active. I walked 2 miles in the morning and swam laps in the afternoon, all while waiting for a call from Tony about my shooter being arrested. No call came. After lunch, I called Nikki's dad to check on her. "Hey, George, how's Nikki doing?" I asked. "Did you know she quit her job?" George replied, catching me off guard. "She quit? Why?" "She was worried rumors would spread. But I think there's more to it," he said. Nikki loved teaching, so hearing this filled me with sadness and frustration. "Tell her I'm sorry she had to quit," I said quietly before ending the call. I spent the rest of the day thinking about the odd questions Tony had asked me about Sarah Bowden, wondering how she was connected to this. By Wednesday morning, I still hadn't heard from Tony. Then Charlie called to check in. "How's the house?" he asked. "It's great, but it's bigger than you made it sound," I joked. After some light chat, Charlie got serious. "A police detective came by this morning asking about you." My stomach dropped. "What did he want?" "He wanted to know where you were. I told him," Charlie said. Realizing I hadn't told Tony the exact location, I reassured Charlie that it was okay. We wrapped up the conversation, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. That evening, I decided to head to Treasure Island Casino to distract myself. I played blackjack for a few hours and returned home around 9 p.m. I noticed a missed call and voicemail from Tony asking me to call back. I dialed him after finishing my sandwich. "You wanted me to call?" I asked. "Where have you been?" Tony snapped. "I don't need to check in with you every hour," I replied, annoyed. "Sorry, but we've got a problem. Our suspect didn't return from Denver. We lost him at LAX, Tony explained. I was stunned. "So, the guy who shot me is still on the loose?" "Yeah, and we don't know if he knows we're looking for him," Tony said. "Do you think Nikki tipped him off?" I asked, feeling uneasy. "We don't think so, but we're keeping an eye on her." "How are you holding up?" Tony asked. "I'd feel better if you focused on catching him instead of asking about my past," I said, still irritated. "Eric, you need to get out of that house, right now," Tony said suddenly, his tone urgent. "Why? Do you think he's coming here?" "It's possible. He could already be there," Tony warned. I froze. "Who is this guy?" "John Parker," Tony revealed after a pause. "Nikki's gym teacher?" "I don't really know him," I said, shocked. "There's more to their relationship than we know. We're still figuring it out," Tony said. "Did Nikki tell you anything?" I asked, fearing the worst. "I can't share that yet, but you need to leave the house now. Call me once you're safe," Tony insisted. Realizing the flight from LA to Vegas only took an hour, I glanced around the dark house and agreed. "Okay, I'm leaving," I said, hanging up. I closed my phone and started turning off the lights, leaving the house completely dark. I cautiously looked out the windows, scanning for any suspicious cars or people. Seeing nothing, I still couldn't shake the feeling that John Parker might be nearby. Grabbing the keys to Charlie's Honda, I went into the garage. Sitting in the driver's seat, I took a moment to calm myself before opening the garage door. Once it was open enough, I quickly backed out and closed it behind me. As I drove 2 blocks away, I checked my rearview mirror, but no cars seemed to be following. Approaching Charleston Boulevard, I noticed a silver Ford Explorer with California plates turning onto the street where Charlie's house was. The timing seemed too coincidental, and I didn't want to take any chances. I turned onto the I-15 interchange and decided to head back to Los Angeles. If John Parker was after me, I wasn't going to make it easy. The Honda held up well, cruising between 75 and 80 miles per hour all the way to the I-10. By 2:30 a.m., I was in Burbank, checking into a small hotel near the airport. Sitting in the dim hotel room, I couldn't stop thinking. Was John Parker after me? Was he still in Vegas or already in LA? The questions swirled in my head, and I couldn't figure out why Parker would want to eliminate me. If he and Nikki were involved, why not just get a divorce? I sat there exhausted but unable to sleep. In the morning, I called Tony and told him where I was, mentioning the car with California plates. "What kind of car?" Tony asked. "A silver Ford Explorer," I replied. Tony's tone shifted. "That's probably his. We found out Parker parked his Explorer at LAX before flying to Denver. He was seen leaving the lot Sunday night." "So he's back in LA?" I asked. "Yes, we think so. Where are you?" "I'm at a hotel in Burbank, room 254, I said. 45 minutes later, Tony knocked on my door. He came in, opened his briefcase, and handed me a photo. "Do you recognize him?" Tony asked. I looked at the grainy image of a man with dark hair in the driver's seat of a car. He looked large but unfamiliar. "Is that John Parker?" I asked. "Yes," Tony confirmed. "I don't recognize him," I said. Tony then pulled out a videotape and placed it on the table. "You're not supposed to see this yet, but I thought you should. Don't tell anyone." "What's on it?" I asked, feeling uneasy. "You'll see," Tony said, leaving soon after. I called the front desk and asked for a VCR. When it arrived, I set it up and hesitated before pressing play. After a few moments of static, the screen showed Nikki and Jim sitting at a table in a gray room. Nikki's face was blank, her hands on the table. I recognized her outfit. It was from the night she left with Jim. This must have been recorded then. After a moment, the door to the left opened and a man in gray slacks and a white shirt entered. "Good evening, Mrs. Anderson. I'm Detective Harris, and I'll be conducting this interview. Before we start, do you need water or a bathroom break?" "No, I'm fine," Nikki replied in a weak monotone. "All right, let's begin," Harris said, settling into the chair across from her. "I want to talk about the events on Friday, August 8th. Please answer honestly." Nikki gave a slight nod. "Were you in the house when your husband was shot?" Harris asked. "Yes," Nikki responded quietly, her head lowered. "Who shot your husband?" "It was an accident," she whispered. "Who shot him?" Harris asked again, his tone firm. "John Parker," she admitted, and the name sent a chill down my spine. "Who is John Parker?" Harris pressed. "He's the gym teacher at my school," Nikki explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "Where were you when the shooting happened?" Harris continued. "I was hiding in the closet," Nikki replied. "How do you know it was an accident if you were in the closet?" Harris asked, his voice sharp. "John told me," Nikki answered. "Tell me what happened that day," Harris said, leaning forward. "John and I were upstairs in my bedroom. When we heard the front door open, I panicked because Eric wasn't supposed to be home yet. I picked up the phone to call emergency, but John told me to be quiet and went to check. He came back and said someone was downstairs, then told me to hide in the closet. A minute or two later, I heard fire shots. I thought someone had shot John, and I was terrified. Then John opened the closet door, and he looked shaken. He mumbled, 'It was an accident.' I followed him, and he said he thought he saw a tool in Eric's hand, so he panicked and shot him. That's when I saw Eric lying at the bottom of the stairs." Nikki paused, her tears threatening to spill over. "I told John to call emergency, but he said it was too late. Then he said we had to make it look like a robbery. While I was checking if Eric was still breathing, John started trashing the family room. I couldn't wait any longer and called emergency myself. I was put on hold," she said, her voice shaking. "What was Parker doing while you were on the phone?" Harris asked. "He just stood there, warning me to stick to the story. He said that if the police came after him, I'd go down with him, Nikki recalled, her face pale. And what did Parker do next? Something strange. He leaned over Eric and whispered something. I think he said, it's for Sarah, but I'm not sure, she admitted. Who do you think Sarah is? Harris asked. Maybe Sarah Bowden, a girl Eric dated in college. John once asked me if Eric knew her, Nikki explained, glancing up briefly. Detective Harris jotted down Sarah Bowden's name before refocusing on Nikki. Now, tell me about your relationship with John Parker. He's just a colleague, Nikki said, her tone growing defensive. Then why was he in your bedroom? Harris asked, his eyes narrowing. He followed me upstairs, Nikki admitted, her voice faltering again. Why was he at your house that day? Harris pressed. We had lunch with some teachers, and I went home to change after spilling sauce on my blouse. He drove with me, Nikki explained, her voice barely steady. So he followed you upstairs? Harris asked, pushing for clarity. Yes, but only because he was carrying a beer mug he bought for me in Germany, she responded. Why bring the mug upstairs? Harris asked, clearly confused. He said it was to remind me of something from Germany. He tried to seduce me, Nikki confessed, her tears finally breaking free. Did you have sex with him? Harris asked, his voice firm. No, I didn't, Nikki replied, her tone resolute. Was that because your husband came home and interrupted? Harris asked, leaning in. No, Nikki insisted, shaking her head. Then why did Parker think you would agree? Harris pressed. He kept bringing up Germany, trying to convince me, trying to manipulate me, Nikki replied, her voice cracking. Was there any reason he thought you would? Harris asked, his tone becoming sharper. Nikki was visibly upset, and her lawyer, Jim, tried to comfort her as Harris continued his interrogation. In just a couple of seconds, I realized it was an earthquake. I quickly stepped back to the bathroom doorway, bracing myself. It felt strong, maybe a magnitude 6. The large window cracked and flew out, landing in the parking lot below. The power went out moments later. It all lasted under 30 seconds, but the sounds of sirens and car alarms soon echoed throughout the city. I waited for the power to return, but as the darkness deepened, I unplugged the VCR and took it to the front desk. My tape's stuck. Can I borrow the VCR and return it tomorrow? I asked. The clerk pointed to a lit area. We have a generator. You can use the outlets to get your tape out. 5 minutes later, I had the tape and was driving home. I called Tony. I'm heading to the house. The power's out here too, I said. Good. I need to talk to you. I'll meet you there in 30 minutes, Tony replied. The house was pitch dark when I arrived. I turned off the car's headlights, grabbed the videotape, and stumbled toward the front door. It was so dark I could barely see, tripping a few times. At the door, I knelt to find the keyhole by feel, mumbling to myself, I can't see a thing. Oddly, closing my eyes helped, and I managed to unlock the door. Inside, it was even darker. I knew the flashlight was in the kitchen pantry, so I moved slowly along the walls, trying to reach it. Suddenly, something felt off. I froze. There was a strange odor, sweat and whiskey. Someone's here, I whispered. Fear gripped me. Could it be Parker? My mind raced. If it was, he'd used the power outage to sneak in. I had to get the flashlight. Moving slowly and quietly, I inched my way toward the pantry. When I finally reached it, relief washed over me. But just as I reached for the door, I felt a warm breath on my face. Hey, Eric, Parker's voice growled, inches from me. My whole body tensed, his sour breath reeked of whiskey. Without thinking, I shoved him and stepped aside. He staggered, caught off guard, and a fire shot rang out, the flash blinding me and the sound deafening. I managed to slip inside the pantry as more fire shots followed. Frantically, I found the flashlight on the top shelf, clutching it tightly as I hid in the corner. Eric, why are you making this hard? Parker taunted. I've waited a long time for this. Just face it like a man. I stayed quiet, trying to control my anger as he continued mocking me. Nicole and I will celebrate your pass away, he sneered. Rage surged, but I knew I had to stay in control. Then in a calmer voice, Parker added, You know, Nicole came to my hotel in Germany. She wanted me. His words stung, but I held my composure. Parker leaned against the pantry door. Eric, where are you? He called out mockingly. She wanted me to eliminate you so we could be together. That was the final straw. I charged at the door, knocking Parker forward. We crashed into the dining room table, both struggling for control. I managed to lock his right arm down, forgetting he was left-handed. Suddenly, his left elbow slammed into my side, sending waves of pain through me. I swung the flashlight blindly, striking him hard. He screamed in pain as the flashlight slipped from my hand, rolling across the floor. Parker groaned, but didn't stay down. He hissed through clenched teeth. "You're going to pay for this, Eric." Grabbing my phone, I quickly called Tony. "Parker's here. Hurry," I shouted. Parker sneered. "Help won't come in time. Nicole and I will be laughing in Rio." An idea hit me. I whispered, "Sarah told me she didn't want you because you were terrible in bed." "Shut up about Sarah!" Parker exploded. The room plunged into darkness again as the phone's light went out. Parker made his move, throwing me across the room and scrambling to find his tool. I stayed low, knowing the next shot would eliminate me. Suddenly, the room filled with bright police flashlights. Parker raised his tool, but before he could fire, 3 shots rang out, and he slumped to the ground. Officers rushed in, disarming him. "He's alive," one officer confirmed. Tony rushed over. "You all right?" he asked. "Yeah, thanks for saving me." "Who shot him?" I asked, still in shock. "All of us," Tony replied. By the time Parker was taken away in the ambulance, I had already explained what happened to 3 different detectives, each reminding me how lucky I was, as if I didn't already know. Most of the police had left, and Tony and I sat in the family room. "I don't get why Parker decided to liquidate me," I said, still shaken. Tony thought for a moment. "It was an obsession. He felt you took something that belonged to him and wanted revenge." "It wasn't about Nikki, was it?" I asked, even though I knew the answer. "No," Tony confirmed. "He used her to get to you." "Was it Sarah Bowden?" Tony nodded gravely. "Yes, her name came up during Nikki's interrogation, so I tracked her down. She's married now and living in Phoenix. I spoke to her before coming here." "What did she say?" I asked, feeling a sense of unease. Tony sighed. "She confirmed she knew you and told me the same story you did, about dating briefly. Then I asked her about Parker. She hesitated before telling me that John was the guy she was with the night you met her at the gas station. After that night, they didn't see each other for months, but eventually he contacted her. He apologized and asked to talk. Unfortunately, she made the mistake of letting him into her apartment. At first, he was polite, but then he got angry and told her she belonged to him. When she tried to call the police, he threatened her, saying that if he ever saw her with someone else, he'd liquidate them both. I absorbed the weight of Tony's words. And she didn't think it applied to me. She wasn't seeing anyone at the time, so she didn't think it was directed at you, Tony explained. And she moved to Phoenix after that. Yes, she left school hoping he wouldn't find her, Tony said. I let out a slow exhale. And she's safe now? As far as I know, yes, Tony replied. I stared at the floor, processing everything. What about Parker? Will he survive? Tony's expression turned serious. His chances are slim. He was already in a coma when they took him. I didn't know how to feel. Maybe relieved, but definitely not happy. Tony interrupted my thoughts. Sorry, but your house is a crime scene again. You'll need to leave everything as it is for now, but it shouldn't take long. Internal Affairs will be here tomorrow since officers were involved in the shooting. Do I have to leave? I asked, dreading the idea of finding a hotel. No, just don't touch anything in the kitchen. You'll probably get your house back by noon tomorrow, Tony assured me. Did you finish watching the video? He asked, referring to the footage he'd given me. No, the earthquake interrupted me, I replied. Tony chuckled softly. Right, I forgot about that. Just don't tell anyone I gave you a copy. When you're done, get rid of it. I looked at him, feeling the weight of the situation settle in. What's going to happen to Nikki? Tony sighed deeply. I don't know. That's up to the prosecutor. If she told the truth, maybe she won't be charged. We stood up, and Tony reached for his coat. I'll let you know if I hear anything more about your wife. Thanks, Tony. I owe you a whiskey, I said, attempting a small smile. At least 2, he grinned before walking out the door. Alone in the family room, Parker's words echoed in my mind. Could any of it be true? Nikki had mentioned the beer glass from Germany, but had she been involved with him? I wanted to believe otherwise, but doubts crept in. Too exhausted to watch the rest of the video, I decided to sleep. My dreams were restless, filled with the chaos of the past few weeks. The next morning, the doorbell woke me. 2 men in brown suits introduced themselves as detectives from Internal Affairs. We're here to inspect the scene of the shooting, one of them said. Has anything been touched in the kitchen? No, I replied. After recounting the events once more, they inspected the scene while I took a shower. When I returned, they were finishing up. You can clean up now, one of them said before leaving. I called a cleaning service, but they wouldn't arrive until Monday. That was fine. I needed time to think. Around 11, the power came back on. I sat down to watch the rest of Nikki's interview, but the videotape was gone. I searched everywhere, even checking my car, but couldn't find it. Panic set in. Had I dropped it when I pushed Parker? Maybe Internal Affairs had taken it, thinking it was evidence. I realized I needed to warn Tony just in case. The rest of the day felt empty. Without the tape, I didn't know what to do. The house was quiet and I felt completely alone. Despite everything, I couldn't stop thinking about Nikki. Could we move past this? That evening, Tony stopped by. After pouring us both drinks, he told me Parker had died that afternoon. I wasn't sure how to react. Relief, maybe, but uncertainty lingered. Tony continued. The ADA isn't pressing charges against Nikki. She cooperated fully, passed a polygraph, and they believe she told the truth. I nodded, though I still didn't know what I would do about Nikki. Tony stood up to leave. Take your time, but don't punish her for something that wasn't her fault. The next morning, I drove to Nikki's parents' house. George greeted me warmly, and inside I found Nikki looking exhausted and tearful. I was so worried, she said, her voice breaking. I'm sorry, I said. I wasn't ready to talk yesterday. Did you know Parker died? I asked quietly. Nikki nodded, her tears flowing freely. I'm not crying for him, Eric. I'm crying for what he did to us. Before I could respond, Mary spoke up. Eric, the district attorney's office called yesterday. They said they're not pressing charges against Nikki. I nodded and glanced at Nikki. Yeah, I heard. That's good news, right? Mary asked hopefully. It is, I agreed. But I wasn't sure what it meant for us. Nikki walked over to me and asked quietly, Can I go home with you? I shook my head, feeling torn. No, I'm not going home right now. She looked confused. Where are you going? I have to take Charlie's car to Las Vegas, I replied. Nikki blinked. But Charlie lives in Sherman Oaks. Why do you need to take his car to Vegas? I cupped her face gently and looked into her eyes. I'll explain everything on the way. I want you to come with me. Nikki wiped her tears and hugged me tightly. I turned to her father. George, I need a favor. Some cleaners are coming to the house on Monday. Can you let them in? Of course, George said. What time? Around noon, I said. Nikki and I should get going. As we left, Nikki said, We need to stop by the house so I can pack. I already packed what you'll need, I replied. She looked surprised. So you knew you'd be taking me with you? You're my wife. Why would I leave without you? I kissed her forehead. For the first 45 minutes of the drive, Nikki was quiet. Then she asked, Did you really pack all my clothes? I packed the essentials, underwear, sandals, heels, and that black dress you like. We can buy anything else, I said. She smiled and kissed my cheek, and we started talking like we used to. But after a while, I noticed Nikki grew somber. What's wrong? I asked. Eric, I'm sorry for everything. I want you to know I love you and that nothing happened between John and me. I just hope you don't lose trust in me because of this. Please ask me anything. I'll tell you the truth. I paused, then asked, Did you break the beer glass? Nikki looked confused, but nodded. Yes, I did. I already figured that out, I said. Nikki looked relieved. I love you, Eric. I trust you, and I just want to move forward. Let's spend these next few days together without worrying about anything. When we arrived at Charlie's house in Vegas, Nikki said, This is much better than staying on the Strip. We spent the day lounging by the pool, and Nikki made a simple but romantic dinner. It felt like we were reconnecting, but I knew readers might wonder how I could trust her again. After the investigators left the house on Friday, I found a videotape in the pantry, which turned out to be Nikki's police interview. I watched the part where Detective Harris asked about John Parker trying to seduce her. Nikki explained that they were in Germany as chaperones, and on the last day of the trip, John gave her the beer mug she had admired. He said it was a thank you, and even though she knew she shouldn't accept it, she did, because she thought I'd like it. Later, after a night of drinking, John kissed her, and for a moment, she kissed him back. Realizing her mistake, she pushed him away and told him it was inappropriate. She ended it right there. That was the truth I needed to hear. Did Mr. Parker leave you alone after that? Detective Harris asked, his voice steady. Pretty much. The next day he apologized and blamed it on drinking too much the night before. After that he behaved, Nikki replied quietly. So you didn't have sex with Mr. Parker? Harris pressed. No, I love my husband and would never cheat on him, Nikki said firmly. When you got home, what did you tell your husband about the beer mug Mr. Parker gave you? Harris continued. I didn't tell Eric it was from John. I said I bought it myself. When Eric loved the mug, I felt guilty for lying and almost told him the truth, but I didn't, she admitted. Did Mr. Parker ever ask you to have an affair after that trip? Harris asked. He flirted sometimes, but he never crossed a major line, at least not until the day of the shooting, Nikki responded, her voice trembling. Why do you call it an accident? Mr. Parker deliberately shot your husband, Harris said, his tone hardening. No, I don't believe he would have done that on purpose, Nikki said, tears welling up as she began to sob. Mrs. Anderson, did you hear gunshots when you were hiding in the closet? Harris asked, pressing further. Yes, she whispered. Can you describe what you heard? The first shot was loud, and then there were two quieter shots after a pause, Nikki said, her voice shaking. Do you know why there was a delay between the shots? Harris asked, his brow furrowing. No, I never thought about it, she replied, shaking her head. Mr. Parker shot your husband in the chest, then came down the stairs and shot him 2 more times. It's clear he wanted your husband dead, Harris stated bluntly. Nikki broke down, and Jim reached out to comfort her. After a brief pause, Harris continued. Can you think of any reason why Mr. Parker would want to kill your husband? Nikki shook her head, her voice barely audible. I don't understand why he'd do it. Is there anything else that might explain why he shot your husband? Harris asked, his tone probing. Nikki hesitated, then said, Maybe it has to do with Sarah Bowden. Why do you think that? Harris asked, leaning in slightly. While we were in Germany, John asked me to ask Eric if he remembered Sarah Bowden, but he didn't explain why, Nikki replied. Did you ask your husband about her? Yes, Eric said he knew her briefly in college. Did you tell your husband that Mr. Parker asked about her? Harris pressed further. No, Nikki admitted. Why not? Harris asked, his eyes narrowing. I don't know, she answered, looking down. Did you see Mr. Parker after the shooting? Harris asked, shifting the conversation. Yes, at the hospital once. He said he needed to talk to me and check on Eric, Nikki said, her voice soft. And what did he want to talk about? Harris inquired. He wanted to make sure I didn't tell anyone what really happened, Nikki confessed, her voice cracking as she spoke. Detective Harris ended the interview, and Nikki left with Jim. As I finished watching the tape, I still had doubts about Nikki. Later that evening, Tony came over and told me the DA wasn't pressing charges. I asked why, and Tony explained that Nikki had passed a polygraph test, confirming her truthfulness. Nikki hadn't had an affair with Parker, and the beer mug was Parker's misguided attempt to pursue her. When I found out that Nikki had broken the mug, it made sense. She probably smashed it because it reminded her of the guilt she felt over the situation. That was the final piece of the puzzle I needed. If Nikki broke the glass, I could move forward. If Parker had done it, my doubts would remain.